Hello and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Matt Freeman, and I'm a coin
And
shot.
I'm Scott Daly, and I'm a Mistborn, baby. I'm going to eat all your medals. All of them.
Of course you
Hello,
are.
everybody, and welcome to the Doof Book Club. I hope you're having a wonderful Friday night. I'm sorry we're running a bit late this month. It's all my fault. It's entirely my fault that I bought movie tickets a month ago and completely forgot that they fell on the date of the book club and thought I could squeeze them both in here anyway. And I think we did. I think we pulled it off just a bit late.
I think it's all going to work out.
I'm sure we know most of the people here, but if you are joining us here for the very first time, welcome. We are Doof Media, and we make podcasts all about the stories we love. We also arrange and organize this monthly book club, which you are here for right now. We got a bunch of people in chat. It looks like we already have some people talking. We have Zendrix. Zendrix, we haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. We got Jay here, Goldfish, Toby, 567. Oh, goodness.
Peter.
Matthias, this is great.
Fish Scratch.
This is great.
Yes.
Hello,
lots of people.
everyone. Ryan's
Great to see
here.
everybody. Ryan,
Hello, everyone.
Wow.
I'm excited.
This is going to be lively. Yeah.
Matt, explain what this whole thing is.
Well, each month, Scott and I select 5 books from a pool submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community. We put up a poll for all of the supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia, and we let them vote on which they'd like us to talk about. And the book with the most votes wins, and then we all read it.
And then we meet up on the last Friday of every month, today, and we chat about the book that was chosen. Matt and I have pulled some slides of some important or interesting moments, and then we dive deep into this book for a couple hours. If you're in the chat right now, you're already doing it, but hello. Make sure, throughout this, we want this to be interactive. This is the one thing we do every month that we want to be an interactive discussion. We want to hear from you guys, so feel free to talk throughout the entire thing. We'll respond to you as we can. If we're talking about a specific thing in the book that we liked or we didn't like, let us know how you felt. And as Matt is reading the summary for the book that we've chosen this month, why don't you guys tell us what you thought of this book if you've read it before, and what you thought of it. So Matt, go ahead and do it.
So this month, our patrons chose Mistborn, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. And here's a summary from Amazon.com, because Goodreads let us down again. In a world where ash falls from the sky and mist dominates the night, and evil cloaks the land and stifles all life, the future of the Empire rests on the shoulders of a troublemaker and his young apprentice. Together, can they fill the world with color once more? In Brandon Sanderson's intriguing tale of love, loss, despair, and hope, a new kind of magic enters the stage. Allomancy, a magic of the metals.
Cool.
Cool.
So we're getting reports in the chat that your audio is a little bit delayed, Matt, and I noticed just on my Skype that was true as well. So that's not a streaming thing; that's just a Skype thing. So sorry, guys. Hopefully it'll fix itself. Matt, talk for me real quick. Let's see if you're fixed.
I'm talking.
It seems closer to sync than it was.
This is all I can do is talk, so I'm just gonna do that. So, Scott, what were your overall impressions of this book?
I liked it a lot, actually. I think this is going to be an interesting episode because I think you and I are coming to this book from a different place. And normally we agree. We might disagree a little bit, but that always makes for a good conversation. I think this should be said. This is my very first Brandon Sanderson. I've heard of him. I listen to podcasts he's on every week, but I've never actually read his books before. So I'd heard good things about this. I think this one was nominated multiple times by our patrons, and the first time he put it up for vote, it won handedly. So it's obviously a very popular book, a very popular trilogy, and I can see why. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about the magic system and some of the world building in this story, which are, I think, the strengths of it. We're going to spend some time on the characters, which I generally liked, but I thought were shallow in some ways. Not that I don't think they're bad characters. I just think they don't have a a depth to them that I like in some of my characters. But I think that was kind of overshadowed to me by everything that the book was doing that I really enjoyed. So that's what I thought about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Yeah, I came away from it liking it in the end, but it was it took a lot of time to get its hooks into me, and by the end I really did enjoy it. So I'm not just going to be criticizing everything. I think I may be criticizing the way some things were set up in the beginning, and I think you and I probably agree about the characters, but overall it was a really fun reading experience. And yeah, and just for reference, since you mentioned you hadn't read any Brandon Sanderson, the only Brandon Sanderson I've read was the final books of the Wheel of Time, which are strange for reasons that have nothing to do with Brandon Sanderson, I think.
Yeah, see, I mean, Matt's opinion has to be taken with the giant grain of Wheel of Time disappointment salt.
That's exactly right.
Not that makes your opinion any less valuable, I don't think. But
yeah, well, we talked about this earlier this week, and you brought me to a much more nuanced place of an ability to express my gripes without just thinking the book is terrible, right? Like I don't think the book is terrible. I have specific things where I think they could be improved, and that's always productive and fun to talk about.
Yeah, we have some people in chat here talking already about the book. Zendrix, this is their second read. Love all the Cosmere books. Is that another trilogy of Sanderson? I honestly don't know.
I think that like he has shared universe, like a shared universe thing going on. Okay. It's called the Cosmere.
I get it.
Yeah. It's the Sanderson EU.
So one of his weaker works out of the ones that see, now I'm afraid to pronounce your name because you said I pronounced it wrong last time. So I'm like Matthias, yeah.
Matthias, yeah.
I mean, I think we'll get into some of that as we go through it. The thing. Cosmere is the cinematic universe of his fascinating. See, I got the Brandon Sanderson experts in the chat really helping me here. I think the cool thing about you and I having a pretty in-depth discussion earlier this week about what you did and didn't like about this book allowed me to kind of tailor the slides to my argument, which is maybe unfair.
Oh, great!
But it's absolutely what I did, and I think it's great.
Fantastic. Can't wait to be utterly destroyed.
Not. Absolutely not. And Nadim asks, do you like the Stephen King universe? I do, but that's because I'm biased. He's my favorite author, so...
Yeah, I do too. I've only read a little bit of it. You've read like everything.
Okay, just about. All right, let's jump into it then, and let's start with
let's do it. All right. The first slide, we have the opening of the story where we establish a couple things. The italicized thoughts of a mysterious person about the end of the world that we find out later is the Lord Ruler, and then find out later is not the Lord Ruler. And then we're introduced to the world. Sometimes I worry that I'm not the hero everyone thinks I am. The philosophers assure me that this is the time, that the signs have been met, but I still wonder if they have the wrong man. So many people depend on me. They say I will hold the future of the entire world on my arms. What would they think if they knew that their champion, the hero of ages, their savior, doubted himself? Perhaps they wouldn't be shocked at all. In a way, this is what worries me the most. Maybe in their hearts they wonder, just as I do. When they see me, do they see a liar? Prologue. Ash fell from the sky. Lord Tressling frowned, glancing up at the ruddy midday sky as his servant scuttled forward, opening a parasol over Tressling and his distinguished guest. Ashfalls weren't that uncommon in the Final Empire, but Tressling had hoped to avoid getting soot stains on his fine new suit coat and red vest, which had just arrived via canal boat from Luthadel itself. Fortunately, there wasn't much wind. The parasol would likely be effective. Tressling stood with his guest on a small hilltop patio that overlooked the fields. Hundreds of people in brown smocks working in the falling ash, caring for the crops. There was a sluggishness to their efforts, but of course that was the way of the Ska. The peasants were an indolent, unproductive lot. They didn't complain, of course. They knew better than that. Instead, they simply worked with bowed heads, moving about their work with quiet
All right.
apathy.
So this is the very beginning of the book, and I wanted to use this part to kind of first talk about the general structural concept of putting these little bits from who, for most of the book, we think is the Lord Ruler's journal as he's going to the event at the Well of Ascension to basically save the world. And I thought that was interesting because I think the book plays with you with that, with like, it doesn't tell you who it is at first, and then you kind of guess who it is, and then the book confirms your guess and then says, no, actually that was wrong.
Yeah. Actually, it's a trick. Yeah. Right. And it's fun. It's fun because I think the fact that you think it's the Lord Ruler means that you have a better impression of the Lord Ruler than he deserves.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of gets you to a point where maybe you sympathize with this horrible monster who's been ruling this empire with an iron fist for a millennia. And I think that is a very clever way of like, you're not sure, and it kind of leads you off balance, and you're not sure because like you're being told. I think one thing that Sanderson does very well is he hides that character from you throughout most of the book. We don't actually see the Lord Ruler until the very end of the book, and so all we have of him is this writing that we think belongs to him. So we do put a lot of emotion onto him without actually seeing him.
Right. I thought we were being set up for one of those, like, oh, he had a good reason for doing all these terrible things, and he has to for some reason, but no. And I think that works. I like that element. And I think we always end up pulling up like the first sentences of every book, because they tell you so much. Like, there's so much here, right? We meet the concept of the ska, the slave class, basically. He calls them peasants here in the text, but they're basically slaves. And the lords and the way they're utterly disdainful of the ska, the existence of the ash falls, the fact that this world is this like dead ash covered world, while I think it's great that like the lord is worried about his suit, where obviously all the peasants are just toiling in this ash. It's a really good framing of what the story is going to be like.
These opening paragraphs in other fantasy stories before. The one that always springs into my head is when I just like ripped apart the Loch Lamora one, which was just like nonsense, like just like too many terms at once, too much stuff going on. And I love the Gentleman Bastard series. Now we've read 2 of them and I absolutely adore those books, but man, that opening was tough. And by comparison, what Sanderson does here is very effective. We like, just like you said, we establish the ash, we establish this slave class, and kind of the difference in the nobility and the slave. Like it's very obvious here that yes, all he cares about is his fine, expensive clothing. He's got a servant that scuttled forward. I love that word, scuttled. It's so dehumanizing. It's really great. And I think it's very, very effective to kind of very quickly get us to understand some of the most important dynamics of this world. Yeah. So man,
absolutely.
so much talk in the chat, Matt. I can't keep up with it. Sorry, guys. So a lot of people said, I think Gervonio said this is the first time reading Mistborn and also their first Sanderson book, then they enjoyed it and they're reading the sequel. Goldfish Bull says they agree that he's not too deep, but he does write good scenes and he's fun cover to cover. I'd agree with that for sure. So I think one of the things I wanted to talk about, as people are mentioning in the chat here, is how the Lord Ruler's story and these little italicized bits like tie into our main plot, right? And I mean, we're going to talk a lot about how the Lord Ruler specifically mirrors one of our protagonists in really interesting ways that I think is going to be fun. But I just like, it is kind of keying you into this idea of a guy trying to save the world, but having doubts about whether or not he's going to be able to, and having doubts in the actions he's taking and the things that he's willing to do. I think that's really great, like establishing a certain tone. And I think it also, like this idea of trust, right? Like the trust, the one thematic through line of this book is the idea of trust. And you kind of, it doesn't directly say it in this opening italicized bit, but it's kind of implied, like people are doubting this hero.
Yeah, right. I mean, I guess a final thing to say, just to kind of say it out loud is introducing this idea that this is the kind of world that has saviors and heroes of ages, and big
Right.
it's going to be a big epic story is what this is saying, right? Anytime where the term hero of ages is used in like the fourth sentence, you're
Yep.
in
I
a
agree.
certain kind of story.
All right. Next slide. So in this next slide, we are meeting our protagonist, Vin. Vin is a thief, and she's in this scene watching her crew boss betray someone, and this sets up one of our most important through lines of betrayal and trust. Vin stood back, slightly shocked. Setting up a scam like this would have cost Theron thousands upon thousands of boxing. If the deal fell through now, he would be ruined. And with the Ministry hunting him, he wouldn't even have time to seek revenge. Kimon would make a quick profit, as well as rid himself of one of his more powerful rivals. Theron was a fool to bring Kimon into this, she thought. But then, the amount Theron had promised to pay Kimon was great. He probably assumed that Kimon's greed would keep him honest until Theron himself could pull a double cross. Camon had simply worked faster than anyone, even Vin, had expected. How could Theron have known that Camon would undermine the job itself rather than wait to try to steal the entire haul from the caravan boats? Vin's stomach twisted. It's just another betrayal, she thought sickly. Why does it still bother me so? Everyone betrays everyone else. That's the way life is. She wanted to find a corner, someplace cramped and secluded, and hide. Alone. Anyone will betray you. Anyone. So here we go. This is our protagonist. This is her central idea. This idea of both everyone and anyone will betray you, which is a thought that is beaten into her head throughout all of her young life. And of course, she in turn beats that into our head through the first few hundred pages of this book when we get this kind of echoing. Everyone's going to betray you. Anyone that trusts anyone is stupid. This whole thing is crazy. And that's the starting point of Vin's arc. And I know Matt, this is where I give you the opportunity to talk about early book Vin and everything you wanted to say about who she is.
Yeah, I mean, I just I think that this was overdone, right? Like, I think he hit this drum of Vin is disillusioned and thinks everyone else is bad and hates everyone. He hit it too frequently and for too long, and it actually caused me to not really like Vin and not care about her until I think you and I agree that the book really kind of shifted when she starts going to the balls, to the noble balls. Then it was like she became a completely different character. But she's so passive, and her inner life is just completely negative and largely unpleasant that I just couldn't. I just didn't care. I just didn't care about her, and I eventually came around to, which I think, if anything, that's surprising, because like normally, if you start out disliking a character, you're just like, well, I guess I'm not going to like this book. But yeah, she shifts pretty sharply at a certain point in the story. Which, yeah, I mean, from like a certain level, you say that's just her coming out of her shell. That's who she always was, and to that I would say, the way you would write that is you would show who she really is on the inside in subtle but obvious ways in the first part of the book, so that it doesn't feel so shocking and like a swerve later on.
I think she kind of does. Like, I think there's parts of her when she's using her luck at the early part of the book. I think that is Sanderson trying to show, metaphorically and literally, the inner strength that lies within her. I do agree. I agree that the problem with Vin and my main problem with this book that I quite enjoyed is how kind of heavy-handed some of this stuff is. Like, I think I said to you when I started reading this book, I was like, I'm 65 pages into this book, and the idea of trust and betrayal has been on every single one of those pages. Like, it is very not subtle. It is very obvious. It is very, very textual that this book is dealing with this idea of trust, and that is the central point. And it's not to say that I don't like what the book is saying about trust, and I think that's a fun theme to explore through this fantasy world of enslavement and powerful empires that are seemingly immortal. But it is laid on very thick, and it's not too deep, right? Like, we don't really explore it beyond the idea of this person has had a life that's made them not trust someone. This person has had a life that should make them not trust anyone, but has chosen to do so anyway. And through the experience of the interaction with these people, they learn a little bit and they grow. Vin maybe doing a little bit more growth than Kelsier, but it's just like it's just. I don't know. I guess I just wanted a little more meat to it.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, you know from the moment she starts talking about trust so much, you're like, okay, that's the plot of this book, is she's going to learn to trust, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely transparent, and that would be fine if it weren't harped on so heavily.
700-page
I
book,
think,
right? Yeah.
And I agree that I'm trying to think of a better word than shallow, honestly, because this is the thing, is it's more like it just doesn't it seems to resolve too neatly. It seems to just be like Vin just kind of sees that the thieves are all good to each other, and decides that she can trust them and she can trust Kelsier. But it's like, that's not terribly interesting in and of itself. Like, yeah, I mean, if you don't trust people and then you hang around a bunch of like really trustworthy, upstanding people for a while, then I guess eventually you'll learn to trust them.
I mean,
like, that's
to me one of one of the most fascinating ideas of this concept of trust, and we'll see it. We're kind of jumping ahead, but we'll see it throughout a lot of Kelsier's story, is this idea that even betrayal will not rob you of your trust. Like you can suffer betrayal, and still the best thing, the thing to make you happy, is to trust the people around you still. And the problem with where I think the book goes is that actually what it says is, no, actually those people didn't ever betray you. So you should, like, I felt like the decision to randomly make it so her brother probably didn't actually betray her at all was a disappointing one, because like, I like this idea of, despite betrayal, you still have to trust people, rather than, oh no, you were just wrong, and that person never actually betrayed you, and therefore you can feel reinforced in your idea of trust, right?
Yeah, I mean, to actually speak on the book's behalf a bit, like, Kelsier has no reason to think that his wife didn't betray him, but he kind of decides that he doesn't want to believe she did, and so he just lives his life that way, and then eventually finds out that there's a good chance that she didn't, like and so it's like his faith, his blind faith, his unjustified faith and trust is basically borne out and rewarded. And so the book is saying, like, look, you can put this kind of faith in people even if they don't deserve it, and then, like, you'll be better off in the long run because you didn't live your life isolated and alienated from everyone. And like, I feel like it's in there. It's just not really. It doesn't really hit home the way you kind of want it to.
That actually makes me like it a little better, because yeah, I mean, that's had you trusted that he would have never done this to you, had you trusted him from the beginning, you would not have lived. You would have been rewarded in your trust later, rather than having to be told later that actually your entire belief system is now built on a lie, because he actually never betrayed you. He was actually the most loyal person, to the point where he resisted interrogation that like nobody else ever has, type of thing. Yeah. So in chat, we've got people going crazy, Matt.
Yeah. A lot of interesting comments. Yeah, it's interesting because Toby says it's funny because it's all a meta trust fall, which is funny because when I first read that, I thought, yeah, because they're mistings. They're throwing themselves around in the air and they're trusting themselves and each other to catch each other. And then I was like, no. What Toby means by meta is that we trust that Sanderson is going to catch us narratively and entertainment fully.
I like how people are like, they can't talk without talking about the other two books, which makes me honestly intrigued to check out those other two books. And Toby here is saying that Mistborn 1 actually was a really terrible standalone, which has me intrigued because I enjoyed it. And so if it's bad as a standalone and I liked it, geez, what does that say about the other two books? Now I really want to go read them. So I think we got to move on. We've got so many slides. And we've only talked, it's been half an hour. We talked 2 slides. So let's move on.
Oh, God. Okay. Next slide. We meet a couple of our side characters, and we get a hint of what Allomancy is. Vin looked down at the half cup full of wine. You pulled on my emotions. With Allomancy, I mean. I pushed on them, actually, Breeze said. Pulling makes a person less trusting and more determined. Pushing on emotions, soothing them, makes a person more trusting. Regardless, you controlled me, Vin said. You made me fetch you a drink. Oh, I wouldn't say made you do it, Breeze said. I just altered your emotions slightly, putting you in a frame of mind where you'd be more likely to do as I wished. Ham rubbed his chin. I don't know, Breeze. It's an interesting question. By influencing her emotions, did you take away her ability to choose? If, for instance, you were to kill or steal while under your control, would the crime be hers or yours? Breeze rolled his eyes. There's really no question to it at all. You shouldn't think about such things, Hammond. You'll hurt your brain. I offered her encouragement. I simply did it through an irregular means. But I'm not going to argue with you, Ham. The beefy man sighed, looking a little forlorn.
This is the perfect example to me of where I think Sanderson doesn't go to enough depth, and where it's almost on a meta level him acknowledging that he's not interested in going to that depth, because here's this fascinating question, right? That Ham has just offered, and in a book that is about kind of oppressive control, right? The whole book is this group of ragtag bandits trying to overthrow this oppressive, like, controlling empire, who we'll later learn is using soothers constantly throughout the city to, like, keep the common people down. It introduces this really fascinating question about this, and then the book basically goes, you don't want to think about that, do you? No, we're not gonna do anything.
This isn't that kind of book.
We're just gonna, I mean, literally, you'll hurt your brain. Don't worry about any of that. And I'm like, no, but I'm with Ham here. I want to talk about the implications of this, or I want the book to reason with the implications of this. And this book really, this, I mean, and again, judging by the chat, these could be things that the books go into more in the future. But in this book, it is really not interested in reckoning with any of the implications of using this kind of stuff.
Yeah, the book comes right up to the edge of some very interesting philosophical ideas, and then doesn't take that one step farther. I guess this doesn't bother me as much as you, though. Like, see, the thing is, I actually love the side characters in this book. I might like them more than I like Kelsier and Vin. I just think Sanderson has done a really great job creating these side characters, because, like, I know who Breeze is, right? Breeze has a particular voice in my head. He has this particular way of behaving. You know how he feels about things. Ham is this great, like, he's a thug, but he, like, loves to have these philosophical discussions and gets disappointed when people won't engage with him about it. And some of my favorite parts of the book were when Vin goes off with the different mistings to get, like, individual training and learn the nuances of the individual
I agree here. And what
medals.
I'm not saying is that they should have actually had this debate in the book. I think that would have been the most boring way to explore these questions. I just think this is an example of the book, the book kind of acknowledging that it's not really going to deal with those things. Like I think it would be much. I don't want characters to just have philosophical discussions. I want the book in its entirety to examine these kind of things, and I just don't think, at least in this book, Sanderson is not really interested in doing that.
Yeah, right. I mean, he was sticking pretty hard to the adventure through line.
It's a weird complaint to be like, this book didn't do what I wanted this book to do, and therefore I'm critiquing it. And that's not a real critique. It's just kind of like it supports my overall feeling of just like that this wasn't that deep of a dive of a story, you know. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And let's learn about the central plot of the book. There were two sides to the underworld. The far larger portion was made up of thieves, crews, whores, and beggars who tried to survive outside the mainstream ska culture. And then there were the rebels, the people who worked against the final empire. Reen had always called them fools, a sentiment shared by most of the people, both underworlders and regular ska, that Vin had met. All eyes slowly turned to Kelsier, who leaned back against the bar again. The Ska Rebellion, courtesy of its leader Yedden, has hired us for something very specific. What? Ham asked. Robbery? Assassination? A little of both, Kelsier said, and, at the same time, neither one. Gentlemen, this isn't going to be a regular job. It's going to be different from anything any crew has ever tried to pull. We're going to help Yedden overthrow the final empire. Silence. Excuse me? Ham asked. You heard me right, Ham, Kelsier said. That's the job I've been planning, the destruction of the final empire, or at least its center of government. Yedden has hired us to supply him with an army, then provide him with a favorable opportunity to seize control of this city. Ham sat back, then shared a glance with Breeze. Both men turned toward Doxson, who nodded solemnly. The room remained quiet for a moment longer. Then the silence was broken as Yedden began to laugh ruefully to himself. So here is this is our central conceit. This is the plot, right? This is our inciting incident. This job is gonna be to overthrow the empire. Here we go. And I actually really like. I like that a lot of what makes this book work is this understanding of how stacked against them the deck is, and I think this the scene where Kelsier outlines his plan is tonally perfect to capture that. Like, I think the fact that Yedden is the one that laughs first, being the guy that is hiring them for the job, is the one that realizes the absurdity of what they're doing first, I think is a perfect little touch that really sells just how insane this idea is.
Yeah. I thought this was remarkably well done, actually, because they're like, it could have been not done well, and then you would be thinking, why on earth would thieves agree to undertake a mission like this? It's completely foolish and foolhardy, and the risk is enormous. The likelihood of success is nil. The reward being offered is a pittance relative to the risk. And the thing is that Sanderson, kind of in the background, when you weren't really paying attention, he has gotten you to understand that all these guys are basically ideologically motivated, but they don't all necessarily realize it. Like, it's not the money. Although that is like part of a story they have to tell themselves, and that's kind of like a trick that Kelsier pulls on them. It's really about the fact that all of them love the idea of knocking down the final empire, and Kelsier has given them this opportunity to come together and work on this together. And you get the idea. I mean, they do it for free, right? But they're a group of thieves, so it has to be kind of managed in this particular way. And I thought that was really clever. And like, for a second, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And then I was like, no, it does make sense. It's just it makes sense on a deeper level, and I was pretty impressed by that.
Great. And I mean, just thinking about it, I was just looking at this as you were talking, and like, the names of these characters are really great too. Like, Breeze is actually a perfect name for his, like, it's just perfect. Yeah. Like, Ham and Breeze are just these perfect names for these characters. I really like it. And then Clubs is the name of the other one that we haven't seen yet. Doxson, Marsh. These are great Doxson. Names. They're really great. I think they do a lot of work towards characterization.
Yeah, I agree completely. I was actually going to say something along those lines. Like, I don't know, like, why Kelsier is such a great name. It's just such a.
It just like.
It just sounds so good.
When you say Kelsier, like, you can see and hear him. And I don't know, like, writing wise, I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you sit down to come up with a name. Like, any of the times I've attempted to write, it's just I need a name for this guy. It's Joe.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely noticed that he tends to follow the rule of not using the same first letter for more than one name if he can help it.
Helpful too.
Which is kind of obvious, but yeah, I mean, like Ham and Breeze, I agree. Like, and it's like, it's hard to articulate why Breeze is such a good name, right? But it is. I tell you, it reminds me of the spell effect of Clarity, which is what his power is. So anyway, in EverQuest.
I was momentarily laid speechless by this deep EverQuest pull that I didn't even think was possible, but here we are. Like literally 2% of anyone who listens to this throughout the history of the internet is going to know what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably just you, really.
I mean, Breeze is a spell
in
EverQuest as well. So,
all right,
just so you know. In fact, it does the same thing as Clarity. We got to stop. Moving on.
Okay. Okay. Next slide. Kelsier is confronted by his brother Marsh about his nightly Mistborn escapades. Marsh walked forward, regarding the charcoal writing board with a critical eye. His clothing was stained slightly by dark ash, though his face was relatively clean for a ska. He stood for a moment looking over Kelsier's notes. Finally, Marsh turned and tossed a sheet of paper onto the chair beside Kelsier. "What is this?" Kelsier asked, picking it up. "The names of the 11 men you slaughtered last night," Marsh said. "I thought you might at least want to know." Kelsier tossed the paper into the crackling hearth. "They served the final empire." "They were men, Kelsier," Marsh snapped. "They had lives, families. Several of them were ska." "Traitors." "People," Marsh said. "People who were just trying to do the best with what life gave them." "Well, I'm just doing the same thing," Kelsier said. "And fortunately, life gave me the ability to push men like them off the tops of buildings. If they want to stand against me like noblemen, then they can die like noblemen." Marsh's expression darkened. "How can you be so flippant about something like this?" "Because, Marsh," Kelsier said, "humor is the only thing I've got left."
This is my
humor and
this
determination.
is why I like Kelsier slide, because I actually like I like what the story is doing with this a lot. We're kind of establishing him very early in the story as being this guy who has drawn a line, and anyone on the other side of that line he just doesn't give a shit about at all. And we're kind of challenging him with that, and I think that's something that is, like a lot of the story is Kelsier showing Vin that there's a different way to live, a better way to live, and Vin has an effect on Kelsier as well. And I think it's around this idea of black and white morality around these people, that everyone on that side is bad and everyone on our side is good. And I didn't pull the slide, but one of my favorite parts of the book is when Vin just kind of goes off on Kelsier about how he's not actually a ska, how he's been living like a nobleman. Like, he's like, ska don't live like this. You've never really experienced what it's like to be like that. Like, it's all bullshit. I love that slide because it's so true. Like, I mean, one of the things that the book emphasizes throughout is how crazy this all is to Vin, who has never experienced any kind of comfort in her life. Just being with this troop of thieves is like experiencing some of the most lavish comfort ever. And I think that's a really great thing to pull. And I like how this earlier in the book is setting up this start for Kelsier, who will eventually come to realize that maybe not all the nobles should be horribly murdered, and not every single ska that sides with them is really a traitor. They're just a person trying to live their life.
Yeah, I agree that Vin makes a really good fish out of water character to kind of introduce you to this stuff. And yeah, it's really cool here how Kelsier is pretty clearly just overwhelmed by hate here. And I think this, I think sometimes Sanderson is a bit shallow and simplistic with his kind of emotional dynamics of the characters, but this feels pretty realistic, actually, that like his reaction to all the things that have happened is to have a kind of hate that isn't like a hot hatred. It's just a like, I'm just going, they are nothing, and they don't deserve anything, and I'm going to take their lives, and it's fine because they deserve nothing less. And that's a very realistic kind of hate that has kind of been baked into him, and he's not really aware of it, right? Like he just thinks this is justice. He doesn't really realize that it's really just he's motivated by hatred.
Is that he had a very similar outlook to the people that he subjugated under his rule. This idea that we are better than them, they are nothing, and therefore killing them means nothing. And I think that's one clever thing that I think the book is doing, that it never comes right out and says, but this treatment of the other as terrible and less than human, regardless of how wronged you've been by those people, only ends in terror and suffering. And I do like what Sanderson does with that throughout the story. All right, moving
Yeah,
on.
absolutely.
We get to talk about Allomancy, as the details of it are finally explained to Vin. Now, Kelsier said, you should be able to notice a kind of pairing between your reserves of metal. Like the two emotion metals, Vin said. Exactly. Find the metal linked to pewter. I see it, Vin said. There are two metals for every power, Kelsier said. One pushes, one pulls. The second is usually an alloy of the first. For emotions, the external mental powers, you pull with zinc and push with brass. You just used pewter to push your body. That's one of the internal physical powers. Like Ham, Vin said. He burns pewter. Kelsier nodded. Mistings who can burn pewter are called thugs. A crude term, I suppose, but they tend to be rather crude people. Our dear Hammond is something of an exception to the rule. So what does the other internal physical metal do? Try it and see. Vin did so eagerly, and the world suddenly became brighter around her. Or, well, that wasn't quite right. She could see better, and she could see farther, but the mists were still there. They were just more translucent. The ambient light around her seemed brighter somehow. Tin enhances your senses, Kelsier said, his voice suddenly seeming quite loud. And it's one of the slowest burning metals. The tin in that vial is enough to keep you going for hours. Most Mistborn leave their tin on whenever they're out in the mists. I've had mine on since we left the shop. So, this is Allomancy. This is the magic system of this world. And, Matt, one of the things that I knew about Sanderson before ever opening a page of any of his books was his concepts around the world building and the systems of magic within his worlds is one of his greatest strengths. So I was coming into this book with that knowledge like in the back of my head somewhere, and I found that at least within this book, that expectation was not let down. I think this system is wonderful. I really really like it. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like everyone in the chat is vociferously agreeing with you, and I agree as well. I mean, it's really cool, right? Like it's at a certain point, once it's all explained to you, I just kind of sat back and like thought through the implications of it, and you're like, wow, this is like, and I was like, it actually inspired me. I was like, I want to think of like a magic system that's as good as this, and then I was like, I can't. it's just too like, and then I started comparing it to other magic systems from other books, and I'm like, yeah, yes. I mean, the fact that everything is so concrete and defined, it does exactly what Sanderson says it should in his kind of theorizing, which is that you understand exactly how everything works, how everything interacts, and so you can anticipate the consequences of any given action.
Yeah, I mean,
you know exactly what the characters
can and
can't do.
You're absolutely right. Like,
and
one of the
great.
things that frustrates me about some magic systems is like the walls and ceilings on it are pretty nebulous. And this, at least based on our understanding earlier in the story, is we know exactly, like, it has a built-in limitation, like it has a built-in resource system, it has a built-in, okay, certain powers only do certain things. Most powers have negative side effects, like just the idea that tin can also, you know, make things way worse. The idea that pewter can actually like put you in danger because it like you're kind of artificially pumping yourself up, and if you run out, then you're just gonna pass out and die. And the cool thing about it to me, and we only get hints of this at the end of this book, but to the point where I think it's very obvious that it's going to expand out, is it's expandable, but it's expandable in a realistic way, right? So like we get hints of these powers, like there's obviously things that the Lord Ruler can do that go outside the bounds of the metals we've been introduced to so far. But we also get to see like his combination of powers basically has the ability to just create new alloys that do new cool stuff. So like it is scalable, right, while still feeling not like ridiculously overpowered.
Yeah, I think it's cool how as strong as the combination of powers at the disposal of a Mistborn are,
yeah,
the enemies remain terrifying. I'm not sure if you pulled a slide about the Inquisitors, yeah, but I thought they were terrifying. Like they're great, right? Like they're yes. The Inquisitors are the ones with nails in their eyes, right? Yeah, I thought they were a fantastically intimidating villain, and they're just like the shock troops, right? They're the mid-tier boss, while the Lord Ruler is just completely off the chain. He can do things that the characters don't even understand how it works, right? And that's like, I'm speaking more meta, more Doylist, in terms of how he structured things, rather than the in-world dynamics of how he did it. And I just thought that, like, the level of threat and seriousness,
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
represented by the villains was something that really worked for me.
The metals with the iron and the steel. I think that's really cool, and like it's inherently super powerful while also being like incredibly risky at the same time. Like I really think it was just a really fun idea. Like I wonder which of the metal burning things he started with and then said, "Oh, I can do all these cool things." And I like that there are some Mistborn who have access to all these powers, and then there's some people that don't have, that have one of them. And like you got your tin eyes, you got your coin shots. Each of them has a nickname that goes along with them. They have a purpose in the gang. They have a purpose throughout the city. I think it's insanely clever. And like, even at the point where I thought this book maybe like was a little too slow or a little too shallow at parts, like the concept behind this system really pulled me through it, because I was always fascinated by it.
Yeah, right. This is one thing that would be really cool to see, on a screen, right? It's because it's all very clever and fast paced. Like, that's one thing I noticed about the combat, is it's just so dynamic and
cinematic.
I'm blanking on the word, but it's just something that would look really good on a screen.
I agree. Like I did.
So, I guess that's it.
You occasionally read stories and you see moments when you're like, this wouldn't translate to a screen at all. I think this, from everything I've seen in this book so far, I think this is easily translatable into some sort of visual medium, because the powers themselves are so visual. Just most of how they work is very visual and visceral, and I like it.
Yeah, and the things that aren't visual, you can still kind of think of ways to convey it. Yeah,
I don't want to get too far into this, because maybe some of the people listening have not read Worm, but he mentions talking about snapping in relation to triggering. I mean, that's a very moments of high stress, high trauma trigger or snap you into your magic. That is something that, I knew before I read Worm that was not like a wholly original concept, and it just keeps coming up in some of the media I read.
Yeah, I think it's just an inherently dramatic idea that power comes with trauma, right? It's almost like a natural human idea, because it's sort of true that trauma unlocks new abilities and changes us in ways that are not always positive. But yeah, people are complimenting the magic system, talking about Wheel of Time. Yeah, Wheel of Time has a much more like
it's been so long since I read those books,
not cinematic, I'll say, magic system.
I don't remember that system has not stuck in my brain. Like, I feel like 20 years removed from this system will still be in my head.
Yeah, well, the problem is a fight between two magic users in Wheel of Time basically just looks like two people standing in front of each other.
Jumpies.
Yeah, cool.
And we didn't.
Gotta do jumpies. You gotta do the jumpies and the flying and the shooting.
Are trained to fight Mistwalkers or Mistborn that like are have no metal on them. What are they called? I forgot. Someone in chat will remind me. But I think that's a cool concept too. That like this world has evolved with like specific counters to these people. And like no one wears metal really because it's too risky. I think it's really cool. Like that. Haze killers. Thank you, Kaiken.
Yeah, I liked that a lot. I thought it was a pretty well done world in terms of the implications of the powers being realized in the story. I did have a couple nitpicks about that. We may get to it. It's not a big deal.
I still don't quite understand how Vin would have never heard of Mistings or Mistborn in this world. Like, I understand it's something that is like kept apart from the ska, but I just feel like it's a really core part of the world, right? And I just like not knowing the details I understand, but like not being aware of it at all, that surprised me.
Yeah, what's funny is I didn't remember that she wasn't aware of it. I thought maybe
I guess yeah, I'm being
it just
too hard.
never occurred to her. She didn't know what the powers were specifically.
To what she's
maybe
heard about this rumored thing.
I don't know. Yeah, because her power is really incredibly weak actually. So
she's just drinking she wouldn't necessarily connect all that to
what the Mistborn can do. Yeah, I thought that was a fun touch actually. That they're just like, you just burn the natural reserves of metal in your body that you get from food and water, and I was like, oh yeah, okay. Like it's such a clever. I mean, just to talk about the magic system for another 15 seconds. It's so clever to use something like metal as the basis for it, because it's like, okay, it's perishable. You can carry around some of it, but not too much. You can basically tune the burn rate of it to be whatever you need. And and also now you have a thing that can be physically taken away from you to depower you, which adds a fun amount like level of drama to it.
I guess my complaint there is,
okay,
I don't buy that in this world those things would be myths, right? I don't feel that like people that have this power would be so far removed from the daily existence of even the lowest denominator, because it's part of the oppression of these people is through people that have this power. So I feel like the book wanted her to be almost entirely ignorant of it so she could be our audience surrogate in learning about it, but I think it went a little too far.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I literally don't
people
recall
in chat
her
are saying it's basically
whether she knew too much about it
like she's
or
heard
not.
About this, but just like through like whispering and myths and stuff, and I don't know. I have trouble buying that.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of actually like that we never really find out what a koloss is in this book. Like it's just like, oh yeah, and then we'll be completely doomed when the koloss arrive. And you're like, oh no, not the koloss. Never see a koloss. Don't have any idea what a koloss is. Anyway. All right. Next slide. Ven's part of the plan is to pretend to be a noble and infiltrate their balls, gaining information on the goings on.
And you did.
Why did you do that? Why did you write it that way?
Infiltrate those balls.
Gaining information on the goings on of the different great houses. If you hadn't capitalized that, I probably would. Okay, whatever. What am I doing? She thought frantically. She could challenge mist and allomancy, thieves and burglaries, mist wraiths and beatings. Yet facing these noblemen and their ladies, going amongst them in the light, visible, unable to hide, this terrified her. Forward, mistress, Sazed said in a soothing voice. Remember your lessons. Hide, find a corner, shadows, mists, anything. Ven kept her hands rigidly clasped before her, walking forward. Sazed walked beside her. Out of the corner of her eyes, you could see concern on his normally calm face. And well, he should worry. Everything he had taught her seemed fleeting, vaporous, like the mists themselves. She couldn't remember names, customs, anything. She stopped just inside the foyer, and an imperious-looking nobleman in a black suit turned to regard her. Ven froze. The man looked her over with a dismissive glance, then turned away. She distinctly heard the word Renault whispered, and she glanced apprehensively at the side. Several women were looking at her. And yet, it didn't feel like they were seeing her at all. They were studying the gown, the hair, and the jewelry. Then glanced to the other side, where a group of younger men were watching her. They saw the neckline, the pretty dress, and the makeup, but they didn't see her. None of them could see Ven. They could only see the face she had put on, the face she wanted them to see. They saw Lady Valette. It was as if Ven weren't there. As if she was hiding right in front of their eyes. I like this a lot. This begins like, I think this is one of the most interesting and kind of novel things that he's doing. Not that, woman infiltrating a noble ball is the most original thing in the universe. But like,
Yeah.
I like the way Vin's character kind of internalizes it. I like this idea of like it was almost the shift that won over the character, honestly. Like I went from being really bored with Vin and wanting to get back to Kelsier chapters to like as soon as she kind of makes this framing where she's like, oh, I can be whoever I want because people will only see the facade, then it's like, oh, she kind of finds her power, right? Her power, for all how awesome being a Mistborn is, her power is this ability she has where she can be whoever she needs to be, and kind of hide in plain sight.
It's interesting because like it's not what I expected out of this book. Like this idea that, oh, she's this badass Mistborn and then it's going to have to do her role in this thing is going to be doing all this badass stuff, and it's not. Her role in the plan is to be a lady, and that's actually, my wife read this book too, and she didn't like that part. She didn't like that we're building up this cool, powerful badass character, and then the story kind of just relegates her to this very female centric type role of being like the girl at the ball, the very Pride and Prejudice type character, and that's, I mean, that's why I enjoy reading books with other people, because that's not something that occurred to me as I was reading it, but talking to her after it, I was like, yeah, I could see that. I could see why that would be a bummer. It's like, oh, your role is to do the girly thing, girl. And that's not, I mean, I don't think the characters really ever address it that way. In fact, it was not originally going to be her role, but it literally no one else could do it. But from a metatextual perspective, this was a choice that the author made.
But I see it as they put her in this role, but she is the one who basically saves the day at the end using her badass Mistborn powers.
But I mean, but this is
so
a large
she just kind of does everything.
It's her navigating social.
But I mean,
mores, really.
It's true.
And her falling in love with a nobleman. Is a large.
Yeah, you're right.
She finds her Mr. Darcy, and she falls in love with him. Which I'm literally reading Pride and Prejudice right now, and it's crazy to me how much this is lining up to where like I almost think like he's like, and then I'll just throw a little Pride and Prejudice in here, because I think Ellen is kind of like a Darcy. Mm-hmm.
That's funny. I mean, I think he definitely that archetype. I confess I enjoyed this part of the book a lot.
I think
it
was in the book for exactly the right amount of time, and then it moved on to other things.
Yeah.
I wonder
if Zendrex says there's a steep decline in balls in the number of in the other books. So,
I'm curious, like.
Probably.
The book does this really interesting thing with this section, though, because I think sorry, I was reading chat and got distracted. I think like there's this thing where you see what's happening is like she's falling in love with Elend, and actually we'll just talk about this when we get to his slide, because we haven't quite gotten there yet. Let's talk about Sazed, because I think I pulled the slide I yanked out the slide I had pulled for Sazed, and I really want to talk about him because he and this whole concept of the keepers is really fascinating and important to the story.
Yeah, he's one of the many side characters who I adore and want to know more about. He's great, right? Like he clearly has his own like agenda, his own stuff going on, but he's like this like genuinely supportive and kind of selfless person who's always able to be there for the other characters. Mm-hmm. And I think it's always nice when there's like clear wisdom in the story, and I like that he has this kind of perspective where it's kind of injecting this real kind of wisdom and perspective into things.
But he has this whole thing where he kind of explains to Vin why he's collecting religions, right? Like this is knowledge of belief systems that were insanely important to people of the before the Final Empire took over, and this idea of even if this plot itself doesn't work properly, the final empire is going to fall one day, and people are going to want to remember those important beliefs that they had beforehand, and he feels like it's his duty to do that. And I really think I love it. I really do love it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's. I almost suspect that he thought of like a bunch of different versions of how the misting powers worked, and one of those versions was this kind of ability set that Sazed people have, and then he ended up just saying like, okay, well, I'll give that set of powers to them, and
And
then
then he
I'll make
turns
them
into a
like
giant
interact
Hulk
in this
monster at the end
complicated
of the
way
book,
where
and that's pretty
if you
cool.
could use both of them, then you could, yeah, no, yeah. That was pretty awesome. Yeah, that was like you knew they were going to
Yeah.
get out of it, but
All right. So
I was pretty satisfied with how
in
that worked
between
out.
the last slide and this one, Kelsier has decided he's going back to the palace to break into the Lord Ruler's hidden room, and Vin decides to go with him. But the Inquisitors are waiting for them once again, and they barely escape with their lives. And in this slide, Vin is dealing with the fact, during her recuperation, is dealing with the fact that all these people in this group are not behaving the way they should. There had been something wrong about simply recovering in bed. Such a lengthy period of rest wouldn't have been given to a regular thief. Thieves either got back to work quickly or were abandoned for dead. Those who couldn't bring in money for food couldn't be allowed to take up space in the lair. But that isn't the only way people live, Vin thought. She was uncomfortable with that knowledge. It hadn't mattered to Kelsier and the others that she drained their resources. They hadn't exploited her weakened state, but had cared for her, each one spending time at her bedside. Most notable among the Vigilists had been the young Mistborns. Vin didn't even feel that she knew him very well, yet Kelsier said the boy had spent hours watching over her during her coma. What did one make of a world where a crew leader agonized over his people? In the underground, each person bore responsibility for what happened to them. The weaker segment of a crew had to be allowed to die, lest they keep everyone else from earning enough to survive. If a person got captured by the Ministry, you left them to their fate and hoped that they didn't betray too much. You didn't worry about your own guilt and putting them into danger. They're fools, Reen's voice whispered. This entire plan will end in disaster, and your death will be your own fault for not leaving when you could. And yet, she ignored Reen's promptings in her head, instead letting the carriage pull her towards Felice. So, this is important because I think this is we're starting to see this is the book showing us the slow shift in Vin's arc, right? Like she's moved on to a new place now where for the first time she ignores Reen's voice in her head instead of acknowledging and admitting it's correct.
Yeah, I liked how. I mean, I thought they hit the Reen drum too hard in the beginning, but I did like how it was used as she starts to shift away from that perspective. And I mean,
yeah. I will say,
I basically bought everything about her
slide out
transformation.
loud,
I just
that I feel like an editor
happen.
could come into this, just kind of cut half of it. Like I think this third paragraph kind of repeats the first one a little bit. Like we established that like you gotta like thieves, you would be abandoned if you're not contributing.
Yeah.
And then we kind of hit that drum again.
I kind of zoned out in the middle of you reading it, honestly, and forgot I was doing a live show. So it's funny, and it was literally during that third paragraph, and I was like, he's just saying the same thing again. Yeah. Are we going to talk about the Mistborn character?
Let's talk about Mistborn.
The guy who talks in an inscrutable language.
I forget what he gets. His new name is.
Well, I don't have it. I don't know. I do too. Well, I don't have a lot to say. Like everybody in the chat is rightly complimenting the audiobook reader and the way the audiobook was pulled off. I thought it was great too. One issue I did have was that I could not understand a damn thing this character said. It was just nonsense to me, and I thought that maybe if I had like the book in front of me, then I could parse it out like at a more deliberate pace.
I don't know. Once they established that he's speaking nonsense,
well, that's good.
I was like, I'm not going to sit here and try to like translate the nonsense. If it's important enough, they'll translate it for me. And sure enough, I think they do. Every time what he's saying truly matters, they translate it. And everyone in chat is saying spook, because that's his new name is Spook. It is. It's another great
Okay.
name. Yeah. There is that
What's
whole
his name?
scene when like
Which is another great
they're
name.
talking. He and Kelsier are talking in that strange language, and then I think it's Dachshund that comes in and says something, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know you spoke that," and he's like, "I'm not. I was just making shit up." It's pretty great. Yeah. So there is something in chat I just want to touch on briefly.
Yeah.
Both
I thought
Daniel
that was
and
pretty funny.
Jay are kind of talking
I like
back
that.
and forth about how much of some of the stuff we're talking in this book is motivated by Brandon Sanderson's Mormon upbringing, which is an interesting line of thought. I didn't know that. I wasn't aware of his personal background.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I think there may be a case that his sort of his perspective on life
right?
and the
I
world
would find
is
it very hard to
derived
believe that it
from
wouldn't in some
his
way.
religious faith and his upbringing and right. Yeah, and I do think like I saw some things even when I was just reading the Wheel of Time where I was like, I feel like this character is different than Robert Jordan's version of this character in a direction that is almost perfectly defined by making them a little bit more. I don't know any better word than pious and religious minded and kind of conservative minded. But
Sure.
I mean, that said, there's a pretty good variety of characters in this story, and I think he manages to paint them all pretty well, right? Like these are all like thieves and killers, and
I mean,
presumably,
and I think that's
Brandon
the
Sanderson
basis
is
of
not.
what Daniel and Jay's conversation,
and he conveys, it's fine,
yes,
right?
this is one
It's
lens
fine.
you can view the decisions in the story through, but it should not be. You should not limit yourself to just that lens because it lines up in a few cases for sure. And I think that's true whenever you're bringing any kind of personal, historical, authorial intent behind the story. Yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be fun to explore that, and I encourage anyone that wants to actually like.
It's
break
an
that down
interesting
and
thing to
explore
think
it.
about,
I would want to read it.
Yeah. All right, next slide. Here we learn about Mare, Kelsier's wife, who died in the mines after "quote unquote" betraying him. Mare was fascinated by pre-ascension times, Kelsier said, still staring out over the gardens. In the distance, the sun touched the horizon and grew an even deeper red. She collected things like that paper, pictures and descriptions of the old times. I think that fascination, along with the fact that she was a tin-eye, is part of what led her to the underground, and to me. She's the one who first introduced me to Sazed, though I didn't use him in my crew at the time. He wasn't interested in thieving. Vin folded up the paper. "And you keep the picture still, after what she did to you?" Kelsier fell silent for a moment. Then he eyed her. "Been listening at the door again, have we?" "Oh, don't worry. I suppose it's common enough knowledge." In the distance, the setting sun became a blaze, its ruddy light illuminating clouds and smoke alike. "Yes, I keep the flower," Kelsier said. "I'm not really sure why. But do you stop loving someone just because they betray you?" "I don't think so. That's what makes the betrayal hurt so much. Pain, frustration, anger. And I still loved her. I still do." "How?" Ben asked. "How can you? And how can you possibly trust people? Didn't you learn from what she did to you?" Kelsier shrugged. I think given the choice between loving Mare, betrayal included, and never knowing her, I'd choose love. I risked and I lost, but the risk was still worth it. It's the same with my friends. Suspicion is healthy in our profession, but only to an extent.
Of the story.
I'd rather trust my men
there.
than worry about what will happen if they turn on me. Yeah, this is the crux, right? The crux of the two characters and their disagreement is being voiced,
clear that Vin is
but they still don't see eye to eye. They don't really understand each other
at this point, right? Because that last slide,
and
we talked about.
yeah,
and I mean, this is not very deep, right? I mean, these are not themes that are like super complex. The idea that like it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all, right? I mean, it's not a fresh idea, but I like it. I mean, I like what Sanderson does with it
Right.
here. And it really endears you to the Kelsier character as this kind of like this tragic figure who, despite the person you care about the most doing the worst possible thing to you, you go on caring about them, and you go on, like, what we learn, and I don't know if we learn it in this part, but it's kind of hinted at here, that the entire reason he's doing this is for her. That the entire reason he's picked up this mantle and decided to move this revolution forward is because it's what she wanted. She always was fascination for the pre-ascension times, fascination with what could be again, bringing the green back to the world, is something that she wanted, and he's carrying that on, despite the fact that he believes or knows or thinks whatever that she betrayed him.
Yeah. I like this a lot, and you know, I've ragged on Vin a bit, and I think that Kelsier from the beginning, I also wasn't extraordinarily fond of Kelsier, because I was just like, oh, he's too powerful and nothing bothers him. He's too much of a badass character. He's the kind of character that I would write when I was like 14, where I just want like basically well, I mean like that's what I was thinking. In fact, I was joking about that when I was like, does this get better, basically, is what I was saying to people, like, because he's the kind of badass that you write when you're too young to understand that characters should have flaws. But then the book does this thing where it says, no, the badass thing is his like hardened, traumatized face that he puts on, but actually he's kind of a softie. He has this, like, what's actually driving him on the inside is loss and this dedication to his wife, who he can't even really bring himself to be upset with. It all ended up working for me, and I thought that was great. Like, interesting. People keep making comments in the chat along the lines of, if you've read other Sanderson books, you know that like he'll get your back, right? Like he'll eventually, he'll make it pay off, right? And maybe
I like that.
I just wasn't giving the book enough.
Way to not give it enough faith, Matt.
Which is ironic.
All right, let's move on. So
I failed as a reader.
About Elend Venture, because Vin has attracted the attention of this young noble, heir to the great house, the biggest great house. So much for keeping a low profile. But he's different, Matt. He's not like all the other noble people. As I recall, Elend said, setting the last book on top of his pile, someone was just pretending to read in order to avoid dancing. I don't think the ladies have any trouble finding more amicable, why can't I talk to partners than myself. Vin raised an eyebrow. I didn't have trouble because I'm new and I'm low ranked. I suspect that the ladies closer to your station have trouble finding partners, amicable or not. As I understand it, noblemen are uncomfortable dancing with women above their station. Elend paused, obviously searching for a comeback. Vin leaned forward. What is it, Elend Venture? Why are you so intent on avoiding your duty? Duty? Elend asked, leaning towards her, his posture earnest. Valette, this isn't duty. This is fluff and distraction, a waste of time. And women? Vin asked. Are they a waste too? Women? Elend asked. Women are like thunderstorms. They're beautiful to look at, and sometimes they're nice to listen to, but most of the time they're just plain inconvenient. Vin felt her jaw drop slightly. Then she noticed the twinkle in his eye, the smile at the edges of his lips, and she found herself smiling as well. You say these things just to provoke me. His smile deepened. I'm charming that way. He stood, looking at her fondly. Ah, Valette, don't let them trick you into taking yourself too seriously. It's not worth the effort. So, Matt, what do you think about this guy?
I mean, there's kind of a trend in this book about me just like not liking characters at first, and then they grow on me, because he's another one where, especially once we get into his head, we're like, oh, he's kind of like dumb and extremely naive, and doesn't really, like, hasn't really reflected much on the world is and the way the world is and his place in it, but
Yeah.
he has the good grace to feel bad about that when he realizes it. So yeah, you come around to him, right? For the time being, you're just like, oh, he's just like he's. I mean, you already made the exact comparison. I was like, okay, he's the Mr. Darcy character,
the interesting
and
thing
Vin's
to me,
totally gonna fall for him.
Here's where I struggle with this character, because so we have a lot of this book is Vin like being introduced to this noble world, and then like we see her kind of starting to fall in love with not just Elend, but the world itself, right? Like this world of balls and pretty dresses and dancing and decorum and soft edges and all these things. And it's interesting because like I think the book primes you to look at that as naive and terrifying, right? Like just like, oh god, you're being duped by this, Vin. You're being duped by this. You're being duped by this. This is not reality. And the thing that I think is interesting about the story is that I think it like she's kind of right in the end. Like yes, some of the noble people are terrible, but like her faith in Elend is not misplaced. He's actually like one of the good ones, and that's, I mean, we'll get to that slide, but the last line of the book is that he's a good man. And I think it's like I was kind of trying to parse her arc and the arc of the story when I was thinking about the book earlier this week, and I think it's interesting that like Sanderson wants us to be terrified for what she's doing, but yeah.
But she comes around she comes around to trusting him, and that turns out to be the right choice, right? I think that's really cool how that works out. Yeah, it's like because it's actually Vin's ability to trust in the nobles, or in one specific noble, that begins to open Kelsier's mind the possibility that maybe they don't all need to be massacred
us
to a man
in the chat, which makes no sense, like technologically, like that both audios are being fed through the same thing. So I literally have no idea why that would happen, right? I have no idea. Yeah, like I mean, our connection is instantaneous. Like I don't.
Yeah,
there's no reason that should be happening.
Fine. I guess I heard like a short delay a second ago, but
yeah, there's a delay in my computer between.
Sorry, folks. I mean, maybe it's got to be like your computer itself somehow, right?
Of your voice, which I don't know. There's
only my voice somehow. Okay, whatever.
Post, which is a bummer,
I don't know if there's anything we can do about it. So
we're doing it live.
We'll fix it in post, folks. Yeah, it's true. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This.
Sorry, I kind of derailed us there.
Good guy.
There's a lot of talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Next slide. It's okay. I think we were done talking about Elend. All right, next slide. Kelsier goes to the caves to visit his secret rebel army. Some soldiers still doubt the plan, so Kelsier stages a battle between two soldiers, supporting one with Allomancy. He then lies to all the men. Kelsier stood, and the crowd fell to a hush once again. "Do you think I would send you against the Lord Ruler unprepared?" Kelsier demanded in a loud voice. "Do you think I would just send you off to die? You fight for what is just, men. You fight for me. I will not leave you unaided when you go against the soldiers of the Final Empire." Kelsier thrust his hand into the air, holding aloft a tiny bar of metal. "You've heard of this, haven't you? You know the rumors of the 11th metal? Well, I have it, and I will use it. The Lord Ruler will die." The men began to cheer. "This is not our only tool," Kelsier bellowed. "You soldiers have power untold inside you. You have heard of the arcane magics of the Lord Ruler uses? Well, we have some of our own. Feast, my soldiers, and don't fear the battle to come. Look forward to it." The room erupted in a riot of cheers, and Kelsier waved for more ale to be delivered. A couple of servants rushed forward to help Bilge from the room. When Kelsier sat, Ham was frowning deeply. I don't like this, Cal, he said. I know, Kelsier said quietly. Ham was about to speak further, but Eden leaned across him. That was amazing! Kelsier, I didn't know. You should have told me you could pass your powers to others. Why, with these abilities, how can we possibly lose? Ham laid a hand on Eden's shoulder, pushing the man back into his seat. Eat, he ordered. Then he turned to Kelsier, pulling his chair closer and speaking in a low voice. You just lied to my entire army, Kel. No, Ham, Kelsier said quietly. I lied to my army.
Yeah. I this is really important to me, and that's kind of why I definitely wanted
line
to discuss
in terms of making the situation even worse.
This is a situation in which Kelsier is like, this army is annihilated later, and it's annihilated specifically because of this lie, because he gave the men and Yedin himself this false belief that his powers were transferable, that he was with them, that he would support them. I mean, just like this is like, I would never leave you unaided when you go against soldiers of the Final Empire. And so they're like, cool, look at this. We got this guy on it. We got this, like, we learn later that part of what he's doing is building himself up to be basically a different god for the people to worship. And so now these people have fully bought into the idea that God, quote unquote, is with them, and so they march to their death. And like, this is our dude, and he's great and powerful, and so far has been perfect, but it's awful. And I like, the book allows him to struggle with it, but like, he's so kind of wrapped up in his plan that he doesn't really mind, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like a big mistake in the moment.
Yeah.
And it is a big mistake. And he's clearly being like callous. He's not listening to his partners, basically, the people who he should be trusting, who he should be listening to and taking feedback from. Yes, he has this kind of secret plan where he's trying to make himself into a demigod, but like, I don't know. I feel like the fact that he doesn't let them in on certain things, like, universally comes back to bite him. And I think that's actually goes well with the theme of the story, which is that, like, you should trust, right? Trust is good.
I had a complaint about this,
and
it's
he,
that this
everywhere that he fails to trust his allies, there's blowback from that.
In fact, you could arguably like say that it was a necessary sacrifice to build this narrative of him as God. Like that people he needed to sell this to these people, because I think he specifically says afterwards that he sends out scouts to spread this moment to the rest of the population of Ska, that like they know about the speech, they know about that battle, they know about all these things, and all this is key to the people buying into this, and he's willingly sacrificing these 5,000. I think it's 5,000 men die because of this moment right here, and he really doesn't suffer a consequence for it besides like an internal emotional one where he does feel bad about it. But he kind of quickly gets over feeling bad to continue with that mission. To me, the army was always.
You could argue that maybe
like,
he wouldn't have died if they still had their army, but I don't think that the story dramatizes that.
Was never the plan. It was my read of the reveal that like his death was supposed to be the catalyst for this whole thing. I feel like that was the plan the whole time.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I think he knew, and like that's one thing that's always kind of in the back of your mind while reading, or at least for me anyway. Like the whole book, I was like, they can't win this fight. Like the way the powers of their enemies are being portrayed as just off the scale of what they can bring to bear, and even like I'm just picturing it in my head. Like I don't see how they can possibly win, and either the book is like not communicating clearly, or Kelsier is aware of this fact and he doesn't care. And I think it's the latter.
Everyone in chat keeps referencing. I'm guessing I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say it's an anime that I don't get at all.
Yeah.
I just always assume if it's nonsense that I don't have any point of reference
Either an
to, I
anime
assume
or
anime.
another Sanderson book. I was assuming anime.
Look, no, I am the arbiter. This book is not anime.
Sounds very anime to me, but
All right,
maybe this
so
book is anime.
we, alongside with Vin, are reading the Lord Ruler's Journal. We're
All
introduced
right.
to a man
Okay,
named
thank you.
Rashek.
Thank you for making the call.
Is it Rashek or Rashik? Rashek. Thanks. You would have done the same, Mr. Audiobook. You're cheating.
Rashek.
Rashek is a
Yeah,
person
you've pronounced pretty much everything wrong, by the way, but who cares?
The Terracemen, however, are a wonder. It is fortunate that we brought them, for no regular packman would have survived the trip. The Terracemen don't seem to mind the cold. Something about their strange metabolisms give them a supernatural ability to resist the elements. Perhaps they have saved up heat from their bodies for later use. They won't talk about their powers, however, and I am sure that Rashek is to blame. The other packmen look to him for leadership, though I don't think that he has complete control over them. Before he was stabbed, Fedek feared that the Terracemen would abandon us here in the ice. I don't think that will happen, however. I am here by providence of Terrace prophecies. These men will not disobey their own religion simply because one of their number has taken a dislike to me. I did finally confront Rashek. He did not want to speak to me, of course, but I forced him. Unleashed, he spoke at great length regarding his hatred of Kalenium and my people. He thinks that we have turned his people into little more than slaves. He thinks that Terracemen deserve far more. He keeps saying that his people should be dominant because of their supernatural powers. I fear his words, for I see some truth in them. Yesterday, one of the packmen lifted a boulder of enormous size, then tossed it out of our way with an almost casual throw. I have not seen such a feat of strength in all my days. These Terracemen could be very dangerous, I think. Perhaps we have treated them unfairly. However, men like Rashek must be contained. He irrationally believes that all people outside of Terrace have oppressed him. He is such a young man to be so angry. So I love this because, like, it's such clear parallels to our characters, right? Like, Rashek could literally be Kelsier in a different time, right? Like, I mean, like, almost exactly. Like, all people outside of our people are our enemies, all of them. They're all responsible for this, and they all deserve to die equally. He is such a young man to be so angry. That is Kelsier to a T. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this sense of superiority, and as we're going to find out, willingness to murder, the savior of the world due to his anger. And yeah, there's a lot going on here, right? Because also the story is basically tricking you, because at this point you still think the Lord Ruler is this guy. And so you think maybe the reason why the Lord Ruler has terribly oppressed the Terracemen is because of something this Rashek guy did. And it's like it's kind of like even worse, the fact that Rashek, a Terraceman himself, is the one who terribly oppresses the Terracemen. I'm not sure if I even understand why he did that. Does the book really tell us why he did that?
Because of the combination of Allomancy
why
and
the Lord Ruler oppresses the Terracemen so much.
What's the other magic system?
Why does he, like, he castrates them,
the magic system? Yeah, because of the combination of those two systems creates basically what the Lord Ruler has, and he doesn't want anyone else to have or know about that.
Kimmy.
So he castrates them and attempts to destroy them so they won't pass on that bloodline. Right, yeah. It's almost as if your quest to do something that might seem noble to you.
The irony is that he himself, only more bad stuff. Who thought that the Terracemen should be superior, is now their worst enemy. So,
all right, let's move on. We're getting near the end here.
Yeah, good stuff. Like it. Okay. Next slide. As the book heads to a climax, Vin and Kelsier meet to discuss how their story arcs are going. This is good. Kelsier has clearly had an impact on Vin, but she's not fully ready to trust just yet. Vin, Kelsier said as they walked, I want to thank you. She turned to him, a tall, proud figure in a majestic mist cloak. Thank me? Why? For the things you said about Mare. I've been thinking a lot about that day, about her. I don't know if your ability to see through copper clouds explains everything, but, well, given the choice, I'd rather believe that Mare didn't betray me. Vin nodded, smiling. He shook his head ruefully. It sounds foolish, doesn't it? As if all these years I've just been waiting for a reason to give in to self-delusion. I don't know, Vin said. Once maybe I would have thought you a fool, but, well, that's kind of what trust is, isn't it? A willful self-delusion. You have to shut out that voice that whispers about betrayal and just hope that your friends aren't going to hurt you. Kelsier chuckled. I don't think you're helping the argument any, Vin. She shrugged. Makes sense to me. Distrust is really the same thing, only on the other side. I can see how a person, given the choice between assumptions, would choose trust. But not you, Kelsier asked. Vin shrugged again. I don't know anymore. So yeah, we're beginning to change. She doesn't know anymore. Kelsier is choosing to trust.
Convincing him, right?
He's choosing to believe something that he doesn't really have
foolish
a lot of evidence for.
And now he's saying this is foolish, right?
We're joining.
Like, yeah, but
things are coming together. It's great.
I see how a person given the choice between assumptions would choose trust. I see that. And she's not quite there yet, because one thing we didn't talk about is that at this point Elend has betrayed her, quote unquote, in an effort to save her of the ongoing violence of this house war. He's told her to leave, and she looks at that as a self-fulfilling prophecy of betrayal.
Yeah, I like how all that falls out, because that could have been really frustrating. I felt like the way I get pretty frustrated in general when stories hinge on like miscommunications being the source of drama. I'm always just like, oh, come on, like that's so cheap.
Well, I mean,
but they don't really.
As long as it's character motivated, like it makes sense for the character.
But they don't.
Like,
he doesn't really rely on it too much to create
says this to her,
create the conflict. I think it works well. I think he's disciplined about it.
Conclusion from it, because she's been waiting. She's in the back of her mind. She's been waiting for this guy to betray her the whole time.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, here it is. Here it comes. I've stopped listening to anything he says anymore, and I just believe my version of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really kind of the right choice for
all the
for
other
him
podcast
to
shows
do
they
too.
want us to do.
Yeah, it's
right
like
on
you said,
guys.
It's character motivated, it's set up, it's logical.
I would love to quit my day job and podcast full time. We just need about roughly 4,000 or 5,000 more patrons.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Well,
yeah.
Yeah, just several times more money than we're making now.
I'm glad.
All I know from this slide is that from now on at parties, I'm going to ask people how their story arc is going.
Controls the ATM mines.
I'm going to ask where they are in their story arc,
and completely destroys all of it. The Lord Ruler responds to this by imprisoning a whole bunch of people in the Renault family for execution, and Kelsier finally decides to fight back, and fights against a powerful Inquisitor. He hit the Inquisitor in the square in the eyes. The creature's head snapped back, smacking against the bottom of the overturned cart. Kelsier struck again, yelling, repeatedly smashing his cobblestone into the creature's face. The Inquisitor howled in pain, reaching claw-like hands for Kelsier, moving as if to jump forward. Then it suddenly jerked to a stop. Its head stuck against the cart's wood. The spiked tips that jutted from the back of its skull had been pounded into the wood by Kelsier's attack. Kelsier smiled as the creature screamed in rage, struggling to pull its head free from the wood. Kelsier turned to the side, seeking an item he had seen on the ground a few moments before. He kicked over a corpse, snatching the obsidian axe off the ground, its rough chipped blade glittering red in the sunlight. I'm glad you talked me into this, he said quietly. Then he swung with a two-handed blow, slamming the axe head through the Inquisitor's neck and into the wood behind it. The Inquisitor's body slumped to the cobblestones. The head remained where it was, staring out with its eerie, tattooed, unnatural gaze, pinned to the wood by its own spikes. Kelsier turned to face the crowd, suddenly feeling incredibly worried. His body ached from dozens of bruises and cuts, and he didn't even know when his cloak had ripped free. He faced the soldiers defiantly, however, his scarred arms plainly visible. "The survivor of Hathson," one whispered. "He killed an Inquisitor," said another. And then the chanting began. So here is the culmination for our boy Kelsier. He kills the Inquisitor, and then the Lord Ruler comes out and he faces him and dies horribly. I thought this fight scene was really cool, and this fight scene is really cool in a very different kind of way from all the other fight scenes, because like this, at least this parts of it, he's not using any Allomancy, right? He's just kind of, this is just like down in the dirt fighting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I agree. I thought it was a great fight. I think Sanderson is generally really good at describing the fight scenes. There were a few in there where it
Mm-hmm.
became monotonous. Actually, the only instance that I didn't like was when they were practicing. It was just him and Vin practicing, and it was just like, this happened, and then this happened, then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and you're like, okay. But like this is a really fun dynamic fight, and yeah, like it's I don't know. I guess for whatever reason, I have a personal preference for the kinds of fights where things get, like you said,
and I'm glad you talked me
down
into this as like a
dirt,
perfect
and
badass line.
They're kind of just scrabbling, right? It's not graceful anymore. Yeah. It's not.
So did nobody in the
smashing them in the face with a
history
rock
of the Empire,
so,
like, everyone's like, we got to find out how to kill these things? Did no one raise their hand and be like, hey, what if we take their heads off? What if we just do that? Did anyone try to just remove their head from their body? That might work. I don't actually care. Like, that's the thing, is I'm mostly joking. Like, that's a very minor quibble, but it's just like they just.
It's funny that the things that bother you don't bother me, and the things that bother me don't bother you.
The mystery of what keeps them, of how to kill them, was this big thing, and it's just like, oh, well, you just take their heads away from their bodies, and it turns out they don't live anymore.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, that's what I'm commenting about. Like, obviously, I know that, like,
I mean, you'd think
the opportunity is for people to actually go up against these things.
Like you would have assumed it was going to be something esoteric, like you have to stab them with a special metal or something,
a
right?
little more complicated than just just remove the head.
Yeah. I think Kayakin is making the excellent point, which is that like people may have tried that and couldn't, because it's impossible to actually outmaneuver them, and then maybe if they did succeed, then those people just die later and the story didn't make it out. And also, I don't care is the final word on that. I'm really enjoying this character. All right, next slide. A lot of things have happened. Kelsier has died at the start of the revolution, then has confronted the Lord Ruler and discovered his secret. He's actually Rashek. How dare you, the Lord Ruler demanded again. After what I gave you, I made you superior to regular men. I made you dominant. Vin's head snapped up. Through the haze of pain and hopelessness, something triggered a memory inside her. He keeps saying that his people should be dominant. She reached within, feeling her last little bit of 11th metal reserve. She burned it, looking through tear-stained eyes as the Lord Ruler held Marsh in a one-handed grip. The Lord Ruler's past self appeared next to him, a man in a fur cloak and heavy boots, a man with a full beard and strong muscles, not an aristocrat or a tyrant, not a hero or even a warrior, a man dressed for life in the cold mountains, a herdsman, or perhaps a packman. Rashek, Vin whispered. The Lord Ruler spun toward her in startlement. Rashek, Vin said again. That's your name, isn't it? You aren't the man who wrote the logbook. You're not the hero who was sent to protect the people. You're his servant, the Pac-Man who hated him. She paused for a moment. You killed him, she whispered. That's what happened that night. That's why the logbook stopped so suddenly.
So
you killed the hero and took his place. You went into the cavern in his stead.
Did you
and
see
you
it
claimed
coming?
the power for yourself. But instead of saving the world, you took control of it. Thought this reveal worked pretty well, actually.
Right. It's like almost like designed.
No. I think the moment he says dominant, I'm like,
to
I
me,
got it. Yep.
A sign of good writing.
But
that you have successfully.
That's like the perfect
masked
time to get it, right?
but you still allow your reader
right.
to connect the dots right as you do.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And again, I love how this, this extends out to our boy Kelsier.
It's almost perfect.
Like you can see a different version of Kelsier. Kelsier who maybe hadn't
the same clue, right?
Hadn't been introduced.
You can't do any better than that.
Could have gotten so angry and so like the hatred of the noble, and like if he had survived and had killed the Lord Ruler, you can see a version of him who would have maybe done the same thing if not for the introduction of this girl in his life.
Yeah. Sure. We've read several books in this book club that are basically about an oppressed underdog rising up and horribly murdering huge numbers of people in the interest of what they believe is justice. And different books have had different degrees of sort of like internal skepticism at the characters' actions. Sometimes it seems to be like, yes, and they were right to, because those people were bad. And then sometimes it's a bit more ambiguous, and you're like, you're supposed to ask, or even in some cases, the status quo was kind of okay, and maybe they should have found a better way of effecting change. And I think this is, I like the way this book handles it, actually, because Kelsier feels fully justified in his actions, but the story is implying, like you just said, that I mean, if you're going to go down that path, if you're going to be willing to massacre the whole noble class, which is basically what he's talking about, right? He's talking about like a French Revolution type deal.
That is what
then
in the background
you become exactly what you are
right?
trying to supplant, right?
This idea that sees the power for himself because we deserve it more than you, the ruling class, does. We are going to overthrow you and take control of you, and we become you. Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't seem like that's where we end with it seems like there's 2 more books in the series, so presumably things are going to go rough for these characters. There's going to be conflict, because there's stories. It's kind of key, but for now. And I think that's a good transition to our final slide. For now, the rebellion seems to have not been a French Revolution entirely bloody affair because of our boy, our good boy. When Master Elend and I found the army, Sazed continued, its rebels were slaughtering the palace soldiers. Some of them tried to surrender, but our soldiers weren't letting them. It was a disturbing scene, mistress. Your Elend, he didn't like what he saw. When he stood up there before the Ska, I thought that they would simply kill him too. Sazed paused, cocking his head slightly. But the things he said, mistress, his dreams of a new government, his condemnation of bloodshed and chaos. Well, mistress, I fear that I cannot repeat it. I wish I'd had my metal mind so that I could have memorized his exact words. He sighed, shaking his head. Regardless, I believe that Master Breeze was very influential in helping calm that riot. Once one group started listening to Master Elend, the others did too, and from there, well, it is a good thing that a nobleman ended up as king, I think. Master Elend brings some legitimacy to our bid for control, and I think that we will see more support from the nobility and the merchants with him at our head. Bin smiled. Kel would be angry with us, He did all this work, and we just turned around and put a nobleman on the throne. Sazed shook his head. But there is something more important to consider, I think. We didn't just put a nobleman on the throne. We put a good man on the throne. A good man, Vin said. Yes. I know. I've known a few of those now. Yay! Not quite. I think there's a little bit after that, but yeah, he is. He. I think one thing he does, and we haven't. I don't think we've actually focused on this the
Yeah,
detail of the
is that the
writing very
last
much
line?
this
I
week
don't know.
on the book club,
Okay.
but he
Yeah, I like
builds
that.
to emotional
He's a
moments
good writer,
very
this man,
well
this
in a way that
Sanderson.
doesn't feel hokey or cheesy. Like this is the emotional moment. Like this last line, "A good man." Yes, I've known a few of those now. That is the culmination of Vin's arc. This
Yeah.
acknowledgement of like the world was shit, the world was terrible, everyone was terrible, like you might as well be alone because everyone's going to screw you over eventually, to this now saying, not only have I learned to trust people, I got a lot of people. I got, this Kelsier, Breeze, Ham, Sazed, and now Ellen are all people that she put her faith into and was rewarded for it. Right, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe even her brother, she can kind of retroactively realize was looking out for her in a way, right? Yeah, and that's what's funny is like from the beginning, I was complaining like, oh, it's so obvious, it's so played out. She's gonna
Yeah,
learn the
right.
meaning of friendship and trust,
Yeah.
and I'm already bored of this. But like, that's the thing is, I think we've talked. I don't remember where we talked about this, but this idea that writing like stories don't have to be original. Actually, they just have to work. They just have to be functional. Like it's always fun to have like an original story to read a new kind of story
Yeah.
that's strange and surprising to you. But like there's really nothing surprising about the fact
I
that Ben comes
completely agree,
around
and I think
and it
that is
has
why
this
I kind of get
specific catharsis
wary
that we knew she
at
was going to have.
uh,
But it's just
calling
done
out
really
of
well. It's
trope
played really
usage
well,
as
and
negative
it
criticism
that's
sometimes. And,
just
and I'm not
that's just
saying
good
that there
craftsmanship of
aren't
the writing.
moments in which that should be called out and it should be critiqued. But I do agree that just because a story is not the most original thing in the world does not mean
Yeah,
that it's bad. And I think what Sanderson is doing here is he is holding true to certain truths of existence, truths of humanity, truths of storytelling, but where he's putting his focus on originality is in world building, is in the building of this magic system. So he built this story that is very traditional, that follows a well trod path, but on that path, there's people that swallow metal and then use it to jump over walls and stuff, and like that's where the story really shines. That like it can use this path to explore fun, neat things, and that's why at the end of the day, just my experience reading this book was a really enjoyable one.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
me too. Yeah, I think I said a bunch of negative things, honestly, but and the thing is, like, none of them were just like I don't think I just was like I don't like this book. That there were specific things where I think they could be improved. I think that you cut down the amount of Vin being very like static and inwardly complaining about everything. Just reduce that a bit. Um, and in fact, maybe the solution in my mind would just be like there are certain sections of the book that, toward the beginning
Yeah,
especially,
I like
could
that.
just be
I
removed.
like that.
Just get
Do we have any
to the
questions
part
or
where
comments
things get
from
really
the audience?
interesting
I know, I'm
faster,
sorry about all the. It's
and
making
then
the
I'd be
back
really
and
happy
forth
with it
conversation really
because
difficult.
the last 2/3 of the book I think are great.
I'm gonna blame Skype. Skype is being terrible.
Yeah, there's a ton of
Yeah, I find
conversation.
that
People
fascinating.
are talking about the other Mistborn books, the other Sanderson books. Um, People say they're all great. I mean, it is interesting. People say this is like the worst Sanderson book. uh, yeah, I might.
Yeah.
I
So
also
Jay
might
says it's
skip
worth
over
mentioning that
to
Mistborn was not
like
supposed to happen. He wanted to tell a
the
story in this
Stormlight
world,
cycle
but
if
didn't know what happened prior to it, so
I'm
he
going to read
wrote this
another
whole
Sanderson
trilogy as
book
just the mythology of the story he
instead of
wanted to tell,
instead
which
of
is
reading the next one in this series.
fascinating. No, I think there are 6 books in this series. So there's the 3 that are this trilogy, and then I think the 3 other ones are supposed to be like years into the future.
Well, is that what the Stormlight Archives is? I maybe that's a spoiler, but oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Zendrex does ask,
right.
do you think you'll continue with the series? And I guess you already answered that. You said you would move over to Stormlight.
People are having trouble
I'm gonna read at least the next
with interacting with us. So maybe we won't do the Q&A
after that, but
quite so much.
I want to check these out. I want to see what happens. So I will definitely read them. Single in-series episode on Sanderson. Do it on Warbreaker. Cool. So yeah, people are just talking about Sanderson books. Yeah. Yeah, he's the Stephen King of fantasy, kind of.
It's funny. I don't really know the names of his books. He's known. I mean, I guess if just in case people don't know, like Sanderson is known as being like this very methodical writer.
Yeah.
He just cranks them out and has a good work ethic and doesn't leave us hanging for 8 to 10 years like some people. They're saying Elantris is his weakest and shows its age. Okay. Everyone be warned.
Where do you see the next book going is Toby's question. You want to tackle this first?
I'm very curious about the nature of this Cosmere thing where these universes these stories are in the same universe but independent somehow. Okay.
Matt, when he decides he's not going to read the next books in a series, just goes to Wikipedia and just spoils himself for some reason. I think book 2 is going to center around a couple of things. I think while Vin is learning, the one thing we didn't talk about is as the final ruler died, the final ruler, the Lord Ruler died. He hints that they didn't understand what he was doing for the people. So like there's this kind of implicit idea that whatever the hero was supposed to prevent, the Lord Ruler was actively preventing it, and there's this idea that like they couldn't find any of the atium that he was supposed to be massively stockpiling, so perhaps there's this like it's been used to prevent some terrible thing coming, and now that he's gone he won't be able to do that. So I think Vin's going to be dealing with that. I mean, the book's called Well of Ascension, so assume it's going to have to do with that, the quest that was not completed by our hero and was instead completed by the Lord Ruler, while at the same time I think the story is going to focus around the struggles of maintaining a government when you've just rebelled. And I'm sure there's going to be people I'm sure there's people outside the wall. Like you said, Matt, there's that scary army that still exists out there that could be recalled to the city. So I think it's going to circle around those two things. Yes, the Colas. Yes.
Yeah, we're probably going to see the Colas.
Yeah. And what I'm most curious about is how that falls into the themes that we're discussing in this book. Yeah, I think that's very much in line with what I was thinking.
Like this book, the ending of it clearly sets up this idea that like the Lord Ruler is like, oh no, you know not what you're doing, and then they kill him, and then you're like, okay, well,
empire,
there's going to be consequences.
He was actually just like continuously saving the world from complete destruction, right? I think that's fascinating. So you're being called out, Matt. All right. Yeah. All right. So next month's going to be a bit weird, guys, for a couple reasons. First of all, the book chosen is going to be 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This is a book chosen by our patron Torch Salesman, who donated to us at the Supreme Leader Doof level, which was my temporary name for a thing that I just left there. So he has selected this book for us, and we're going to be covering this book. This is it's a Nobel Prize winning book, as you can see right there on the picture. It's a different kind of book. It's not the kind of book we normally cover, but I'm excited to check it out because I've heard a lot of really good things. Right. The other little bit weird part is the time that this is going to be. Both Matt and I are meeting up with our good buddy and frequent podcast guest Michael. The weekend that we would normally
feel
be
like
having
I've been
book club,
hearing
we
about
will
this
all be
book for my whole
together
life.
hanging out
So
in a cabin in the middle of Colorado. So there's no way we could do a book club that day. Just impossible. So instead, we're going to do it a little bit earlier. We're going to do it on Monday, the 24th of June at 9:30. It'll be at a normal time, just on that Monday instead of Friday. So a little bit different, but it'll still be happening. So, and of course, next month we'll be opening up the poll again. So you'll get to choose the book for July and going forward, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, I believe that's true. Yeah.
all right. Yeah. And whatever we end up reading for July, we'll have extra long time to read it. All right, everybody. I think that's it for the discussion. And thank you so much for tuning in live, those of you who did. And for those listening on the podcast, you should come hang out with us next month. It was a lot of fun. The chat was extremely lively.
We stream
far beyond our ability to actually keep up, actually, but we did our best.
I've never had this problem, so I don't know what is specific about tonight and this particular stream where it decided to be terrible. But we appreciate you guys' patience, and thanks for joining us, everyone that was here.
Yeah. So if y'all like what we do here at Doof Media and you want to see more of it, go ahead and head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia and consider donating $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. You get access to our private Discord server as well as the ability to vote for which books we cover and tons of other cool benefits. Check it out.
Or on our Twitter account at Doof Media. Thanks, guys, and we will see you all next month. Sorry, I'm trying to be professional this week, but I'm reading the chat as I go, and I'm just laughing. Yeah. Yeah. I'm surprised people stuck with it. Thank you guys for sticking with it.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean,
we won't torture you anymore with this, whatever you're hearing right now as I'm saying this.
Your signal strength is not as good as it normally is, and that's the only thing I can think of. But when I look at Streamlabs and your audio coming into Streamlabs,
it's really a shame.
It's coming in correctly. Yeah, that is happening too. Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, thanks for hanging out, guys. So sorry about that. That's awful.
Yeah, I mean, I can see on see on the YouTube that my face will flicker gray. Yeah, I mean, every 15 seconds or so. I don't know if that's related.
Capturing Matt at a separate sample rate, but it doesn't make sense for that to happen because, it shouldn't be that way. The way I have set it up, that the only way it could be doing that is if Streamlabs decided to suddenly just stop making any logical sense. But see you guys later.